So like the subject for today,
Yes.
maybe we talk about like kind of like the evolution of IDX and how, from the very beginning we did mostly design user experience.
Mostly.
And then we kind of have this unique like blend of product and user experience, but we're starting to get to a point where like we're starting to add some definition to those things.
Absolutely. Yep.
So you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think, are you saying like a history of what IDX and
No,
Neudesic,
like let's
or
just go through our
Yeah,
deck,
let's
like,
go
those,
through
like,
this.
Yeah. So
All right.
So when we're talking about like the term IDX, which I know that we're evolving to probably going more specific and having definitive look at like business strategy, product strategy.
Yeah. Well, that
user
part of it
experience,
would be called business strategy and
Right.
transformation.
Yeah.
So if you're going to loop all of that in,
Right.
that's the
So
big
we're looking
picture.
at like business strategy and transformation.
Our parts of that, product experience, product strategy, I don't think that's a name. I think that's what we do.
Right.
The name could still be innovation design group,
Right.
or ideation
Okay.
design group. So I'm still not going away from IDX as far as renaming the branded group of it. But what we do is product experience, or product strategy. So that's kind of where I'm thinking. I'm trying not to lose that brand.
But like, and when we're looking at like business strategy, I think, we got business strategy. They're really focused on like, what are the business outcomes that you're trying to do? And I think a lot of the stuff that the IDX kind of started really bringing in is that human-centered
Absolutely
part of that, right?
Yep, absolutely.
The human-centered. And then as we started to experiment with design thinking and really bringing that in, I think with design thinking, it's how do you merge all of those pieces together, the human-centered, the outcome-driven, and then how do we become more efficient across that? So there's like some of the principles that we've been adopting and applying. And as we're creating that intersection between business strategy, product, user experience, UI design, all the way good stuff. So.
Absolutely. I think in the past, when I first got hired here, it definitely was a feel of creating technology. How do we force this now into a user or a human? Not taking a lot of input from them, although a lot of the things we were doing was like SharePoint and some applications, but more business applications, internal business applications, where people are kind of like, I don't need it to look pretty, right? And then, so why would we need you? You do have to have people use it.
But I think there's something that we can look at from like we apply empathy to technical strategy and technical solutions, right? So like really understanding why someone cares about SharePoint really helps you really focus on the things that need to happen, right? Instead of having to solve every problem that a person would ever need for SharePoint, if you're really just focused in on maybe HR announcements or sharing files to
usually
input your 401k.
Yeah.
All of a sudden it becomes a little more palatable.
It was more like a lot of them used it as their company portal.
Right.
Teams would collaborate. Information would get pushed from corporate forms, pretty much anything like that. It was very useful.
And I think that's where a lot of the aha moments started to come in, right? It doesn't matter what the technology, what the solution is. If you lead with empathizing with the people and understanding what journey or what process they're using these tools with, everything is lit up and you understand exactly what you need to achieve.
Well, case in point, a lot of times when a company or a business came to us and said, we want SharePoint, it was the why was normally, I would say, because we got a deal on it. We have money coming from Microsoft to get it installed.
So now you got to spend all this money to maintain it.
Oh, absolutely.
You got a great deal.
No, it was stupid. And they're like, well, I don't really care what people do. Won't they just do stuff? You just put it out there and then they just create things. And that's how it's supposed to work, right? It's completely a platform that anybody can use. Well, the problem with that is that it's a bunch of garbage now, and nobody uses it because it's a bunch of garbage. Right. And maybe some people are using it in a way but some people aren't. So it's kind of similar. Like you could lay it out there, right? You could lay it out there as a platform and let users decide if they have the expertise to do something. You didn't train them. They didn't know anything about how to do it. So a lot of bad habits would come about. And that's kind of like, and maybe that's maybe an anti, user first kind of scenario. Cause like, I'm just providing a platform for you. You are the user. You get to do stuff with.
I mean, there is some usability in there, right?
There's at least learnability of the tool.
Context is a little different from somebody that's producing content and executing on that content versus now you're enabling.
And you're enabling everybody to be a producer.
And you're starting to like figure out, how do I change behavior to support or to encourage that these users or these people use the system in the right way that was intended, right?
It's similar to Teams.
Yeah.
Like how we use it, right? Like did somebody say we need to set up and organize it in this way? And look what happened. It starts getting bad. And then you end up almost deleting most of the stuff or moving it to somewhere where then you're like, oh, I got it. Like I get it now, right? Yeah. I'm going to organize this better.
Yeah.
Right.
And I felt like Microsoft Teams they solved a problem that was out there, right? And it's like, how do you combine all these collaborative tools?
It does,
and bring them into one, right? Yeah. Which was like, to me, it switched it, right? Because I hated SharePoint.
Yeah.
But it's the same technology as SharePoint, but it's the way it was presented was a little bit better for me.
Isn't it funny when you want to actually get something done right, you actually have to go into SharePoint to do it?
I know.
You can't do it on the team side. Right. So it is funny, like it's forcing us to actually use it more. But.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so like, just from our perspective is like, we started kind of really building like product strategy and user experience, right?
Yep.
And so really looking at like user experience more like focused on like how are we changing behavior with like interfaces and with designs, right? Think beyond just like, maybe not just looking at the features that are part of a mobile app, but like what user flows, what are the journeys, what are the user needs and things like that from that perspective. Then we started kind of moving into like more product strategy where we're looking at the whole thing holistically from a process perspective, from a journey
technology
perspective.
Too.
Yeah.
That technology people are not off the hook as far as product strategy. It has to be involved.
Yeah.
And I think that's the true then, right? In that area.
Yeah.
User interactions and user experience of behavioral change strategies go into the user experience part, where they are in some ways even looped into the product strategy. Do I change experiences? I will be changing experiences. How do I manage that organizational change?
Yeah.
Using them as part of the organizational change.
Right.
They're gonna be.
Yeah. And it's how do you get into like more of a, to your point, is like a product mindset of like trying to figure out what am I trying to achieve on all the activities that I'm doing, from either from a design perspective, from a backlog management, prioritization, right? Like how do we go away from, take a step back and look at the why we're doing this, not on how and what we're trying to do, right? So instead of figuring out, okay, I've got this timeline and this deadline I need to achieve, how am I going to work backwards to get to that timeline, versus like, okay, well, what are we trying to achieve here? And then being a little more guided by that light of saying, okay, are we trying to make X person more efficient? We're trying to make HR more efficient. Are we trying to enable people to use this tool better? Like now your activities are a little more guided rather than saying, I got to launch this SharePoint application or this Teams application in 3 weeks. Right.
For better, for worse.
Better or worse. Go. I checked all these boxes.
Yeah. I succeeded.
Yeah. And so like, that's
give me a
like,
bonus.
Like I always wanted to like ask myself, like, how do we measure the true impact, right? How do walk away from all of this. We deliver so many features that look great. It's like, how do I know that this stuff is actually working and solving that problem? And I think that's the main question that I've been trying to answer for myself, right?
Well, unfortunately, it takes time because then you have amount of usage exploratory heuristics that have to go involved to be involved in that. Because, if you introduce something right away, most of the time it's, oh, wow, that's different. Maybe it's delightful, but maybe it isn't. Like, oh, that seems like it's going to change. I'll have to use it for a bit, right? I have to use it before I can see it. And then there's like 3 months that go by, and then I'm like, it's actually doing the job, right?
Yeah.
It's doing the job.
Well, I remember one time, like I was at one of the transportation organizations that we consult with, and I drew the 4D process on there, and I left it up there, and I overheard somebody say, "Oh my God, this is an infinity loop, so we're going to be doing this forever." Yes. And I was like, "Oh my!" Like I started cracking up when I heard them say that, because like,
yes, you are.
Like at first it's like scary, but to your point, like what you were saying is like, you're constantly, it's the continuous improvement, right?
Yeah.
When you get yourself away from being perfect in order to release something or to deliver something, it becomes more about continuous improvement, right? You're iteratively learning, going through that 4D process, but in the action of doing that, you're refining your solution as you go.
And you're mitigating any kind of future change.
Right.
You're mitigating the impact of a governmental change or a sentimental change in the market.
Yeah.
You're not necessarily, if you go through it even a few times, I'm talking about through the loop, there's going to be a point when either you run out of money,
yes,
or something, a catalytic kind of change happens in the world, and I have to then pivot my idea to go down a different direction. If you're not doing the continuous improvement,
you'll never know that
you'll never know. You'll never know, or you will be so ignorant to it, or you're so obstinate to not do it, you'll crash into the change.
Right. Exactly. And that's good, because that, like, I think that's where like our holistic approach comes in, right?
Yep.
Is that we're not doing this with little guide, right?
Right.
Little guidance. I think also with the customers, like, you're doing this with the experts. So you're bringing in that business strategy, that technical expertise, and then we're trying to represent the people that are using that through the human-centered side of things, right? And so, to your point, is like we're mitigating the risk by bringing those experts in and working together through that collaboration, and then getting that feedback loop quickly so that we can pivot and change as things go, right?
I think it's making sure too that that's somewhat of a refined, efficient process, because I do think there is I always say you're going to pay for it somewhere, right? If you don't do it, you're going to pay for it down the road. You may be in perpetuity,
and you might not be there when you pay for it,
right? And who cares?
Which is like, where are you going to learn?
Yeah.
Right? So like, I think, but there's a cost in not being aware and not learning.
Well, you'll pay for it in any kind of future engagement with another company.
I know.
Right? If you didn't at least give them hey, this is going to happen, and you're kind of kicking me off, right? You think it's done.
Yeah.
But it isn't. I'm just going to warn you, it's not even a warning. It's just be aware of the change. I'm not going to be here to help you. So I just want to make sure you are aware that it's going to change. And if you're not mindful of the change, then I don't know. Then you will crash.
Yeah.
Don't blame me.
I mean, that's where like that makes sense, because that's like, as we started really just kind of looking at it, like, I know you've been doing consulting for quite a bit, right? I've got 8 years in consulting, and I've learned and guided. And a lot of the times you're trying to tell the customer, hey, these things are going to happen. And we used to talk about like the difference between the fortune teller and I'm thinking Sherpa, but it's not the Sherpa, but somebody that goes along with you in the journeyman.
Sure.
So like the difference between the fortune teller and the journeyman. The fortune teller tells you, hey, this is gonna happen to you in 2 weeks, and they tell you to stay home, and you're like, nah. That day comes, you're like, yeah, there's no way that's gonna happen, right? And you're kind of frustrated because the fortune teller is like, how the hell do you know, right? Yeah. Why would you know that this is gonna fail? And whereas a journeyman is there with you, taking the path with you and pointing out the risks and things like that. And I think that's where a lot of like our idea of like this graphic or this visual of how do you guide through this journey, because sometimes things are simple and easy. Why are we gonna spend too much time planning or discovering, versus sometimes you gotta come in, right? So that's when we started really adopting a lot of like the risk versus confidence type quadrant that we can prioritize things with, and then also look at how do we express value with everything that we're doing. How do we express the value and the time commitment that comes out of each piece that we go through that, right? So like one of the things that I loved is like when we started really just kind of defining, okay, these are the paths, this is how we go through, right? Because there's the lean approach where it's like sometimes just getting work done and putting it out there is enough. You want to learn stuff, right? So that's where you got lean.
Some people over plan that board,
right? I found myself over planning,
right? Because it's easy.
Yeah,
it's easy to over plan, or it's easy to plan a trip when you're just going down the street.
Yeah,
but it's like, well, man, I'm so confident in this, and I feel like that's very productive in people looking at what I'm doing. It's like, no, guys, I know you drive straight.
Yeah,
and then it's at the end of the road. By the way,
exactly.
Like you just spent a lot of time planning on driving down the street.
Yes.
when the big trip is still being looming over us, right? And it's like,
but that's where the risk comes into play, right?
Yeah.
Like confidence versus risk. Confidence, I know I've been to Disneyland multiple times.
Yeah.
If I call my
I've only been once, by the way.
I know. It's like
I couldn't tell you
most recently. Most recently in my life.
Yeah.
I was just like talking to my wife about this, is that I only went to Disneyland once before I was like 30 years old. And I still remember that trip. Yeah. And speaking of that trip, right? My parents didn't even know on the way back, they didn't even have enough gas money to make it back to,
because they suck it all out of you when you get there.
And I was like, but that, if I were to call my wife right now and be like, let's go to Disneyland, she'd say yes, because we have done it before. We're confident. We know exactly how long it takes us to get there. We have an idea of where we're going to stay, right? So our confidence is pretty high. The risk is pretty low, right? The risk is that we show up. Yeah. And
you might even figure out how to do it cheaply.
Yes.
Or cheaper. Right. But I didn't realize you could bring food in.
Right. Like even now the risk is pretty high, but maybe we're willing to take on that risk of not being able to find a ticket, because you have to have reservations.
Right.
But at that point we have fallback plans, right? So like that same thing plays out.
Reservations for what?
You have to have a reservation for your ticket.
Which one?
To go to Disneyland.
In the park?
Yeah, you can't just show up anymore and just get a ticket at the front desk.
Yeah, I bought mine online, but I felt like it was very much just go in.
No, you have to have a reservation for the day.
Oh, yeah,
you can't just show up.
Right. Yeah, like, you need the day. You can't just show up.
There were days
day.
when you could just show up to Disneyland and just be like, "Can I have 4 tickets?" And they'd be like, "Here you go, sir." Nowadays, it's like, well, let me see if we have any capacity.
I see.
Most of the
they
time,
don't want to overfill it.
Right.
Well, it's a bad experience then, too. So they're actually thinking about their experience.
And I think that plays out with a lot of organizations.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how if we show up and there are no tickets to Disneyland, are you going to be happy if we just go to the beach?
On to Knott's Berry Farm.
Right. Knott's Berry Farm, right? Like that plays out a lot in a lot of the delivery. Like somebody says, hey, we've got this idea. We're going to go to the cloud, right? Just that same idea. And it's like, well, what if we get there and
it's raining?
Yeah, it's
no, just joking.
And it doesn't achieve the things that you wanted to achieve, right? And that's kind of like what, I think that's one of those things that we don't talk a lot about is in business strategy. You're very much, it's like planning a trip to Disneyland, or
sounds like a nightmare.
Planning a trip to the Galapagos Island is a little more complicated than if you were to go to Disneyland.
That's
right?
True.
Because
you for sure need a reservation to go there.
I don't
think you can even go there.
You need a boat.
Yeah, exactly. There's definitely
a captain.
Yeah.
And you're probably right. You probably need a clear.
There's governmental
stuff, right? So like that's like those are like two extremes of like the stuff that we've done it before. We have precision around it. We've done it over and over. We know exactly how to get there, and we'll get there, versus never been done before. Maybe I've never done it, but there are people that have done it, and I have little clarity, little confidence of that. So it's kind of like what we do from a product strategy and a design thinking, and from a user experience perspective, is really lay out all of that up front, right? And so that's where we have like these processes, the workshops really identifies like, is this a trip to Disneyland, or is this a trip to the Galapagos Islands, or are we talking about going to Mars? It's no one's ever done before, right? So like that's where we're just starting to plan those things.
Right. That makes sense.
And
so if you asked my wife if I did that same thing, she'd be like, hell no, I'm not going. I'm like, but we have experience.
She's a planner.
She's like, I know.
She's a planner.
I have experience, and I don't want to go. That's what
I know. Like I'm on the opposite side. I like my vacations to have a little bit of torture inside of them. So like for me, I want to come back from a vacation where I can't feel my legs.
Jeez.
And so like, don't ever vacation with me.
No, I won't.
Because
I'm the opposite of that.
I've had, you know, what's funny is like I've had some of my family members vacation with me, and they hated me afterwards. But then
I'm not sure that's why.
The next next time I see it, well, because I'm like run. I have to have something going on.
Yeah.
And I have like, I don't want people sleeping till 9 a.m. till 10 a.m. I want to be out experiencing at 7,
I'm with you on the early.
Yeah.
I'm with you on the early, because I definitely am an early person. I'm going to go and get it done.
Yeah.
But then towards the end of the day, I just want to sit by a pool for the rest of the day. Right. Like I'll go really hard until noon.
Okay.
Then I have beers at the
Where are you?
I'm done.
Like I'm good if I'm on a beach, on an island. I don't want to be by the pool. I want to be at the beach and just chilling. I'll do that all day. But if it's like, I don't know, San Francisco or Seattle or I don't know, what's another, Boston, I don't want to be chilling by the pool. I want to go see historical things.
There's nothing.
I want to walk around.
There's no pool to chill.
Try the food.
Boston.
You know?
Yeah. No, there's different experiences that you're probably searching for in certain different cities.
Yeah.
Right?
I like, that's me. I just want to go explore. And in my mind, I'm like, I could relax at home.
I think I get a little bit antsy if I'm sitting there too long. I need to be in the ocean, like bobbing. As long as I'm bobbing around,
there is something about bobbing in the ocean. But yeah, so I mean, so that, you know, we've got some good stuff around, you know, just from a product strategy perspective. I think we continue to develop a little bit further and adding a little more intricacies. I think one of the biggest things that really pointed out, right? So like as we're looking at it, like we got a lot of smart people at Neudesic, and we're very strategic. Everybody's strategic, down to the developer, the React developer, or whatever you want, cloud migration. But it's around like the way I think we're always trying to, like, one of the toughest things is communication, right? And just really identifying like what we're talking about. And I think really understanding, like, we do a lot of process evaluation of process, understanding of processes and things like that. So, you know, I think really having clarity, like when we're talking about business strategy, we're looking at the business process and maybe a level 0 process and things like that. But as you start kind of going deeper into the problem, the intricacies of the processes, level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5 that make up that business process, is now we're starting to really look at what are people thinking? What are the employees that we're trying to enable? What are the customers we're trying to enable? What are the things that are going through our minds? What are the questions? What are some of the